You're listening to a production of SportsLink Digital Radio.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of My 2 Cents, presented by SportsLink Digital Radio and also presented by Victory Honda Muncie. And welcome to October. It's our first special on the episode of My 2 Cents with the MLB Postseason officially here. I'm here with Landen and Griffin and PBPO, Griffin Leo. It's a pleasure to have you two on the show, guys. Welcome to the show.
A pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to be here. We're finally in October. What's better than October? Playoff baseball. You're in the heat of college football. Let's do it.
Yeah, it really is a pleasure to be with October ball. And this is one of my favorite times. It's basically everyone's favorite time of baseball is when the postseason comes around the corner. Especially the last week of the regular season also was a really tough stretch. We talked about it on the last show how tough that NL wildcard was, and how we talked about how going down that stretch is going to be a fun one. But before we get to the actual fun part of the show, the MLB postseason, the juicy stuff, we're going to quickly recap some Ball State sports that have happened over this last week. Ball State football, a tough loss against Western Michigan, 42-24. And I've read a lot of speculation that if you're Mike New, you cannot be in a good place if you're Ball State Cardinals at all. And it really is a shameful thing to see them go out against Western, and they were down 20 something, 20 points to 3. It was not a good sight for Ball State. And certainly if you're Mike New, guys, it certainly has to be a tough loss going into Eastern Michigan this weekend.
Well, of course, you look at it, and coming off Georgia Southern, tough loss that not a whole lot of people saw coming to that extent. You figure you enter Maction, you fight hard on the road. Maybe even if you don't get the result, you still get some positive vibes. It was more of the same. The offense was better, yes, but it was behind Lane Hatcher, who, as we know, isn't going to be around this program that long. I personally wanted to see Samanza again, see him start to grow. Hatcher played well, so I can't argue with it. But as far as getting this team moving in the right direction, there's going to have to be some changes.
Absolutely. I mean, 1-4 right now. You lost your first game 44-14 at Kentucky. You lost 45-3 at Georgia. Okay. Those are two games that we all expected Ball State to drop. The home win against Indiana State, you have a 20-something point fourth quarter to beat Indiana State. Indiana State hung around for a long time in that game. It was a very slow game. And then the fourth quarter, we just blew them out. And then you get blown out at home 40-3 on family weekend against Georgia Southern. That was brutal. And then last week you have your first conference game at Western Michigan, and your quarterback goes 26 for 37, puts up 316 yards or 3 touchdowns, and you still lose by 3 scores.
Yeah, that's just unheard of, especially with the fact that Ball State has now come off losses where the defense has given up 40-plus points against Western Michigan, a team who many people projected them to beat. And it just really is is this really a statement loss? Is Ball State really going on a downward spiral right now? But they got to get a win. It's this next week against Eastern Michigan, guys. They have to get a win. It's just, for me, it's just Mike New has to get a win against the Eagles in Eastern Michigan.
Absolutely, they're in trouble. I mean, they had 48 rush yards against Western Michigan, by the way, and they gave up 461 total yards. That just can't happen, especially against Eastern Michigan next week.
Yeah, Eastern Michigan, not exactly the greatest team on paper either. You got to think from a Cardinal perspective that it's a game that they can and should win. Looking at the line, they're 2.5-point underdogs, yes, but it is on the road. But with Maction, you never know. They Eastern Michigan coming off of 2 road losses to Central Michigan and Jacksonville State. The latter matchup, losing 21-0. I mean, they're no powerhouse either, but from the Cardinals' perspective, you got to start somewhere. And coming up, looking down at the schedule, 2 big home games with Toledo and then homecoming week versus Central. You got to find a way to get it going on the road before it translates to the home.
Yeah, certainly. And to be on a losing streak is not really the right thing for a football team. It downs the morale in the locker room. And I think a lot of people are starting to take notice of that, especially with the speculatives that possibly the hot seat is just heating up a little bit for Mike New, but hopefully things can get back on the right track for the Cardinals next week against Eastern Michigan. Then we go along to Ball State field hockey. Ball State suffered a crushing conference loss to Kent State 4-2, as they will try to rebound to go to North Carolina to take on Davidson College on Friday. But I noticed at that game, it was really frustrating for Caitlin Walsh and the Cardinals. They were up 1-0 at halftime, and Kent State just ended up going on a run in the fourth quarter. They scored 2 goals in 20 seconds, and that's just not something that you can ask for if you're Caitlin Walsh in the defense and the Cardinals. But over the last, Kent State's a really formidable opponent for the Cardinals, as they have, I believe they're 19-1 against the Cardinals since 2009, which is not the best, which is a really tough record to show. But if you come along with these losses, a team that a really formidable opponent to Kent State, but I was going to ask Caitlin, is this a positive step in the right direction for the Cardinals? They made it competitive. Last season, Ball State got blown out 7-0, and it was not pretty. This year, they managed to make it a very competitive game. So, is this a step in the right direction for the field hockey program in terms of developing the players?
Most definitely. I mean, you look at the team, they've had a massive turnaround as of late. This loss, yeah, it stung. It broke a 5-game win streak. This team was not playing well at the beginning of the season, starting to turn it around just when you want to in MAC play. You play a really good opponent in Kent State, and they played well. I was at that game, and the second half things kind of opened up. Play was moving faster, and they just got beat by a better side.
Yep.
Not the end of the world. You look at their upcoming schedule, and I expect that the team will continue to play well. They go on the road to Davidson and Longwood, and there's no reason why they can't get 2 road wins.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and you look at the 0-4 start. They won 5 in a row, as PBP Griff mentioned. Streak ending to 2 goals in 20 seconds. That you ended up losing by 2 goals. I mean, that's end of the day that ultimately lost you. So.
Yeah, Caitlin Walsh was physically frustrated on the sideline. You could see it. I mean, you could just tell that there was some physical emotion coming out of Caitlin Walsh and the Cardinals there. But like Griffin said, they got it. They get 2 easier road games coming up with Longwood and Davidson, and hopefully they can get some momentum going and continue to be successful in the future.
Absolutely.
Then we move on to Ball State cross country. Ball State finished 8th of 12 teams in Chicago at the Loyola Lakefront Invitational. The Cardinals had 2 runners finish in the top 25, Carly Spletzer and Sarah Mahena-Smith at 23rd. Cross country will be back in action on October 13th when they head to Peoria, Illinois for the Bradley Pink Classic. And the cross country team, they sure do love their running, but to have 2 runners finish in the top 25 is just really impressive for the Cardinals, indeed.
Yeah, especially with the MAC championship coming up in a few weeks and like where they're at.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I know much about cross country. I'm certainly not.
Yeah,
fast.
but I don't know much about cross country either, but I do know that having 2 runners in the top 25 is just as impressive.
Oh, of course. And I mean, with cross country, it's not the conventional home and away that you have. You're very rarely running at places that you typically run. It's new ventures, new opportunities, and you just want to see growth and you want to see improvement. And 2 runners finishing in the top 25, as you mentioned, that's the kind of improvement that we want to see out of this team. And you mentioned MAC championships coming up. This is the time where you want to find your best form.
Yeah, for sure. And with cross country, it's a very lengthy sport strictly because these runners, I got to give it up for these athletes in these cross country runners. They have to go through a ton of training, and they got to be gassed by with this training and all that they go through. It's got to be hard for them to be able to push through the hard times and have 2 runners finish in the top 25. I got to tip my hat to them. We in this room can never do it, and that's why we're here.
Right, that's why we're talking right now.
Yeah, that's why we're talking right now. And as we move on to Ball State women's volleyball, you got to love what they do in MAC play. They get the double sweep against Eastern Michigan on Friday and Saturday. The Cardinals remain undefeated in MAC play, and they'll go on a Ohio road trip to take on Miami, Ohio on Friday, and then a tough matchup against Bowling Green on Saturday. You got to love what you're seeing for the Cards here, especially after the rough start that they had in the regular season. They started 3-8. They've rounded off a couple of MAC wins, and they're still at the top of the MAC. And it's really impressive to see.
Is it safe to say that Ball State women's volleyball is back?
Yeah, for sure.
They came in. We knew that they would look better in MAC play. Mm-hmm. That wasn't too much of a debate, but to see them look this dominant, 12 sets out of 12, you cannot argue against it. I'm really interested to see what's going to happen on their road trip. They're going to go east to Miami of Ohio, and then a big one against Bowling Green, MAC championship rematch. I know I was sitting in the Indianapolis International Airport listening to that championship game. I was heartbroken when we saw how that game ended. And I know the team is going to want redemption and revenge even more. That's where we're really going to see how this team can compete in MAC play. Can you do it against the best? Because, yeah, Eastern, they're all right. But we were supposed to win those. Can we get a result? And can we at least, even if we don't win, can we at least push them to the brink against Bowling Green? That's the big question.
What an opportunity to go on the road and do it too. At Bowling Green, I mean, if you can knock off Bowling Green on the road, that just says a lot about your program. Personally, I've had a lot of stuff. I'm a big Notre Dame guy. I don't really have much to say about the state of Ohio, so I'm really hoping that Ball State sweeps this weekend because just Ohio deserves it.
Hey, with the volleyball team, that you mentioned that Bowling Green game, that's going to be a statement game. If the Cardinals even if the Cardinals sweep them, and if a sweep or 5 sets, it's a statement win on the road in terms of where Ball State fits in the MAC, and it's going to be a big one to see. And we transition to Ball State soccer. The Cardinals got a statement win in a physical game against Toledo 2-1, and then tied with Western Michigan 1-1. They'll come home to take on Kent State on Thursday. And some of us were there to witness the Toledo game to see how physical it was. There were bodies flying everywhere in that game, and it's just not a very physical game when you go on to see with Ball State soccer, and not much of a super physical game, but. Right. Boy, were their bodies flying everywhere, guys.
I was at a football game for a minute there at Toledo. But, hey, they won their first ESPN game of the year, first Ball State Sports Link. Let's give it up there. And, tying with Western Michigan yesterday, they got 7 games left to try to make something. I think looking forward, they're in a good spot, though. They're playing physical. They're playing their most physical soccer of the year. Big 7 games coming up.
Yeah, women's soccer, it's one of those things where physicality really matters. And Coach Josh Reif's squad has found that as the season's gone on. We mentioned the Toledo game. They were going at it the whole time. That first half, we were just waiting for one of the teams to take advantage. Second half, everything came in 5 minutes. 3 goals in 5 minutes. Ball State then hanging on till the very end. Bethany Mosier, couple of crazy saves late in the match. And then, you mentioned the draw against Western Michigan. I'll take a point on the road.
Yeah.
A draw on the road in action. I mean, I'm not expecting this team to run the table. But if we can get results and bring that momentum back home, I completely expect the Cardinals to win on Thursday against the Golden Flashes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially with them tying the Western Michigan 2-2 in another high-scoring game. This Cardinals offense just continues to be efficient. And you said it with Bethany Mosier. She's just been incredible for the Cardinals. And we actually have our own Giovanni Alcantara and Tyler Klein's working on a story on her. And just a terrific story out of there coming out from those two. And as we move into the MLB postseason, it is finally here. And the bracket is on. And the race to the World Series is upon us. And guys, we're going to break this down game by game, series by series. And the first matchup we got the first round byes for the AL, Baltimore and Houston. And then the NL. It is Atlanta and Los Angeles. And the first series we're going to talk about is Texas going on the road to take on the Tampa Bay Rays in the best of 3, guys. It's going to be a fun one. And undecided for the Texas Rangers, which is very interesting because they have Jacob deGrom, they have Scherzer out due to injuries, but the Rays have a couple aces of their own in their arsenal. They have Tyler Glasnow and Zach Eflin coming to take on the Texas Rangers, and it's going to be a fun one. One of the guys I'm looking at is Yandy Diaz. What a season he's had. He has a .330 batting average, first in the AL, 22 home runs, is 5th in the AL in hits with 173. He's also won the 2023 AL batting title, and Texas really got a lot to go on their hands, as this is their first playoff appearance since 2016. But what about that hitting trio with Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, and Dolis Garcia? But the question I want to ask you guys is, how will the pitching injuries of Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom affect the matchup between the Rays?
Well, I think it's tough to doubt the Rays in the playoffs. They're such a disciplined baseball club. You know, you look at their roster, and they've got guys who will wear you out. And we've seen it years past in the playoffs. Tampa Bay will play you till the end, close games, not a whole lot of scoring, and they've got the pitching staff to go deep too. So it's tough to doubt that Tampa Bay team. Texas, they've got options, but you mentioned the injuries to the pitching staff. I'm not sure if I can see them knocking off Tampa Bay, especially with all 3 games being played at the Trop. But, another thing to look at, I was watching the Tampa Bay series this weekend, and their defense was looking a little shakier than I'm used to seeing it. Manuel Margot in the outfield dropped a fly ball, let one under his glove that turned into an inside-the-park home run. It was like I was watching the Little League World Series. And, well, I doubt that that's going to continue. You wonder if it's still in the back of their minds.
Yeah, and the Rangers, that's just a blow to them. A big blow is their pitching right now. I watched I forget who they were playing. Was it the Diamondbacks? They brought in Aroldis Chapman with the bases loaded, they brought in Aroldis Chapman looking for the save, and he loads the bases, didn't get a single out. They're going in the wrong direction, and especially with just a 3-game series on the road at the Trop against Tampa Bay, who's going in the right direction. I mean, we all saw Tampa Bay, how they started the season. They choked it a little bit, but ultimately were able to make it to the postseason. So I don't know. This pitching for the Rangers, it might cost them the series. I honestly think Tampa might win it 2-0.
Yeah, I don't think you can say that Tampa choked by any means.
Yeah,
I mean, they put up 97 wins. It was 99.
Right, I thought
like Baltimore.
Right.
We'll talk about Baltimore later, but Baltimore has been exceptional.
Right.
And that division as a whole has been phenomenal. You
sure.
you expand the playoffs, I'm sure all 5 teams would be playing.
It was like this way last year too. I mean, that division last year was just as competitive as it is this year. But this time you throw Baltimore in that equation, and this is the first time that this playoffs haven't featured either the Red Sox or the Yankees in a long, long time. So you throw new teams in there, and it makes the AL East just even more exciting and competitive. I think it's a really interesting thing. But you talk about the Rangers. They've certainly slumped. And having your 2 best guys out certainly is a factor. Mm-hmm. But the Rangers had a lead in the AL West on the last week of the season, and they lost it to the Astros.
Right.
And it's just brutal to see, but can the Rangers rebound and get a win? I just don't think. I mean, the Trop is not really an intimidating, in my eyes, it's not really an intimidating place to play. Let's be honest here.
Right.
But the Rays as a whole are a very, very intimidating team. They're hitting, playoff Randy. You can't go wrong with him. He's
Right.
just insane in the playoffs. And I love watching Randy Rosarena. I'm excited to see what he does in the playoffs. But I just don't see how the Rangers can get out of this one. I got the Rays in a sweep, and it's not going to be close. And with having your 2 best pitchers out, it's going to be hard for the Rangers. And I love the Rangers. I love what they've done, especially with that hitting trio I just mentioned with Seager, Simeon, and Garcia.
Yes.
It's going to be fun to see how they match up against this Rays pitching squad. But I still see the Rays getting it done early, and they're going to be dominant from start to finish.
Yeah, I could see Texas grabbing a game. We don't have all the pitchers' info out yet. We don't know quite who's going to start. I think Glasnow gets it done in game 1. Maybe Texas grabs game 2. But yeah, I'm with you. I think Tampa moves on.
What if this series turns into a slugfest, though? Now, who we taking if that happens? If this is just an all-out slugfest, I think, honestly, Texas might outslug Tampa if that happens. If it turns into a bullpen.
They definitely have the power to do so.
If it turns into a
do.
bullpen matchup, which it very well could.
It definitely could, but I just feel like Tampa is one of those teams where no matter where they are in terms of seeding in the postseason, we've seen this from 2020.
Yeah.
No matter where they are, no matter what seed, they could be the 6th seed, and they can make a run in the World Series. We saw it in 2020. Mm-hmm. We've seen it where they've gone on runs of the ALCS. All it takes is for one team in this postseason to get hot. We saw that with the Phillies. Look how they were like a 5-6 seed. They were a bottom seed, and they made the World Series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't want to relive that series. I'm a big Cardinals guy, so I don't want to relive that disastrous series for St. Louis last year. But yes, you're exactly right. All it takes is one. If you get past that, just like the Phillies last year, if you can get past that one game. Game 1 is the most important game of the series. If you can get past that game 1, it makes your life so much easier.
Yeah, well, it's a tone setter, right?
Exactly.
You play hard those first few innings. You emerge as the favorite. The pressure just falls off your shoulders, and I honestly think that by 3 innings into game 1, we're going to know who's going to win because can the Rangers hit Glasnow? If Glasnow shuts down the first time through the order in order.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the Rays just they just batter you and they make your spirits
They wear you down, man.
Die.
They wear you
It
down.
also is one of those things where if the Rays shut down the Rangers, they're hitting. The Rangers have nothing. I mean, you said yourself, the pitching woes, the bullpen.
Yeah.
Without that hitting, this Rangers team is just going to fold, and it's not going to be pretty. And I think the Rays do dominate from start to finish. Like I said, it's going to be a sweep. I don't think it's going to be close. But then we move on to our other wild card matchup. Griffin's Blue Jays made the postseason as a 16. They'll take on the AL Central champs this year. the Minnesota Twins. Game 1 will be at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. And the Minnesota Twins have named their starters for the first 2 games. In Game 1, it'll be Pablo Lopez, and in Game 2, it'll be Sonny Gray. But what a turnaround for this Minnesota club. But the AL Central as a whole, let's be honest, it was not a good race. I mean, it was a fun race to see because the Twins pulled away with a month and a half left to go in the season. But the problem with the AL Central is that it's been the weakest division in baseball, I think, for the last 3 years.
Absolutely. I don't care who wins it. It could be Cleveland. It could be Detroit. It could be Chicago. Whoever comes out of the AL East, it's AL Central. I'm sorry. They're the worst team in the playoffs. AL, NL. I hate this series so much. It doesn't matter who's starting for Minnesota. They should be the 6th seed, honestly, just because of their division. But, hey, kudos to the Blue Jays. They fought all season. There was a time that this season I thought, this isn't going to look good for Toronto. But they played their tails off, and I think they are a dark horse to contend for an AL championship.
Well, I'll try to keep my bias out of this as much as I can. But I can tell you wholeheartedly, I am so happy that we dropped down to the 6th seed on the final day of the season. Because as it stood Sunday morning going into those games, we were going to Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
And then if the Jays were able to get out of that series, go to Baltimore. Now you're looking at a very manageable path where you have Minnesota and then Houston. I'm not saying that they're going to be favored. I know they're not even favored against Minnesota by the sports books. But when you compare it, I like the Jays to get to the championship series. And whoever they face on the other side there between Tampa Bay and Baltimore, even Texas, if they somehow manage to go on a run, that'll be a difficult series. But yeah, you mentioned they're a dark horse. There's a path to the Fall Classic for the Blue Jays.
Yeah, for sure. And we talked a little bit before the show, Griff, about how the Blue Jays can get there. And the thing is that can the pitching hold up for the Jays? I know their bats are a little bit inconsistent. They've had kind of, I guess, Vladdy had a little bit of a down year, not really the season that we expected him to have. And the bats haven't really been there for the Blue Jays. I mean, but Bo Bichette's really been he's their top hitter. You would expect Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to be their top hitter, but Bo Bichette is there in that position.
Mm-hmm.
But the Twins are also looking for their first playoff win in 20 years.
It's going to be 21 years.
Yep, it's 21.
Well, and I just want to mention, you mentioned Bo Bichette and Vladdy Guerrero. Yeah, Vladdy's had a down year, and Bo Bichette's been exceptional. But Cavan Biggio, the impact that he made in the second half of the season, because you mentioned that there was a time that didn't look good for them.
Correct.
They got swept in a 4-game series at home to Texas, and they went down 2.5 games out of a playoff spot, and they responded by sweeping the Red Sox. And Cavan Biggio was on fire in that series, and he's one of those guys where he hadn't really put it together. Coming out of AAA Buffalo, Guerrero, Bichette, Biggio, they were the trio of Hall of Fame sons, and there was a lot expected out of them. And Biggio really hadn't done much, but coming into the second half of the season, he really turned on the Jets. He's batting in the 4 or 5 hole, depending on the game now for the Jays, and he's going to be huge in October to keep that offense moving. Because you're right, it is inconsistent. There's days where their top 4 in the order will go 0-4. And their pitching and their defense has kept them in a lot of ball games that they shouldn't have been in to begin with. And that's something that'll be interesting in Game 1. You got Kevin Gausman on the mound. He should have a quality start.
Should, yes.
But can the offense get going, win that first game on the road? Because if you go down 1-0 on the road, that's a long way back, you know.
Right, and look for Kevin Kiermaier to step up as well. Kevin Kiermaier in the playoffs, and especially, I love Kevin Kiermaier. My girlfriend is really close with the Kiermaier's family, so nothing but good things to say about Kevin Kiermaier. The way he played in opening day, too, the first game with Toronto, and he wins the game for Toronto in St. Louis on opening day. Watch out for Kevin Kiermaier to make some noise here in the playoffs.
And it goes to show, because I think this series is going to be fun. It's going to be a fun series. And I know everybody looks at this series on paper and goes, oh, the Blue Jays should blow them out of the water. But let's not forget that this pitching staff for Minnesota has been really, really good. As much as the records show.
Yes.
These two guys, Pablo Lopez and Sonny Gray, was at one point a Cy Young contender. And I just don't want people to overlook this Minnesota team, because it was last year where the Cleveland Guardians were the AL Central champs, and Tampa was expected to beat them out of the water too, and Cleveland almost made it to the ALCS.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. So you never know with the AL Central. They could get hot in the postseason. You never know. But my thing is with Twins is the same thing I have with Toronto. They have really inconsistent bats.
Yeah.
Very inconsistent. They're first in AL in home runs. The Twins are, but they're 21st in hits. So they could get a bat on a really good ball, or they could just go and do nothing with their power. It really goes to show, and it's going to be a battle of inconsistent bats. But the question is that who's going to have the question really to answer this to win who wins this series is who is going to get the bats hot first.
And, I'm a big believer in you live by the long ball, you die by the long ball. At the end of the day, baseball is a small ball type of game. Who can get a base hit now and then? It's going to come down to who can honestly get a base hit now and then, not just hit home runs. Because this is the type of teams that, obviously you said it, inconsistently hit. They lead the league in home runs, but they're 27th, you said, in 21st in base hits. You got to have base hits to make a run in the postseason.
So who are you taking, Dane?
I'm going to say the Blue Jays in 3. I think it's going to be a gritty series. I really do. I think that Minnesota at home, if it was in Toronto, I think Toronto would sweep. But because they're on the road in Minnesota, I think Minnesota fans they have a certain energy that they bring to games.
Yeah.
And I think that Minnesota is going to cause a little bit of some problems for this Blue Jays squad. And I think that I think Minnesota does, and I think Minnesota wins game 1. I think Minnesota takes game 1, and then the Blue Jays come back to win the next 2. And I think it's going to be a wake-up call for Toronto. And I think that Toronto, with the first game, that their bats don't get going, but games 2 and 3, they just completely light up the Twins. And I think it's going to be a slug match, but I got the Blue Jays in 3.
Yeah, I got the same result as you, but I got it a little bit differently. I think the Jays get it done game 1. They set a good precedent. I think Gausman goes 7 innings, maybe a run against. But the bullpen's not going to have to do a whole lot in that first game. Second game, I think Minnesota responds. The fan in me wants it to be a sweep so that I'm not on my knees crying throughout Thursday's game. But I think Minnesota responds in game 2. It sounds like they got Sonny Gray pitching, and I think he's going to get the job done. Then it goes game 3, and I think the Blue Jays just show that they're better.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think Toronto wins 2-0. But I think every game is decided by, I'm going to go with 2 runs or less. I think it's going to be, like you said, gritty. I think it's going to be small ball type of game, low scoring, but I like Toronto with a sweep.
And then we move over to the National League side of things and the wild card. The first game we talk about in the National League will be the Miami Marlins. And what a story they have been through. They were back. They were out of the postseason at one point going into the final week. But the Cubs just went on a slide, and the Miami just slid right in to get the 5 seed. And they will be taking on their NL East. This is the first. Let me mention, this is the first time in history that the Miami Marlins and the Philadelphia Phillies have ever met in the postseason. And it's an NL East rivalry matchup. This is going to be a fun one, and I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, who would have thought that the Chicago Cubs wouldn't be in October if you looked at this 2 weeks ago? I know we probably got some people listening that are from this area and
that
are probably unhappy
Mm-hmm.
with me talking about it, but they choked.
They did.
They had it,
they did.
and they slid terribly at the end of the season. And it's just inexcusable. You can't do that in September if you want to play October baseball. And it's just one of those things, and the Marlins took advantage. I was looking at that race. I'm from California originally, so I was hoping the Giants would sneak in. My dad's a Reds fan. I wouldn't have minded them. But looking at the Marlins come through, they got hot at the right time, and they deserve to have a shot at this. I think they got a good chance against the Phillies.
The only thing they got going against them is it's at Philly, and Philadelphia in the postseason is something else. I mean, honestly, it's one of the best atmospheres in all of baseball as is, but in the playoffs, them fans are mean, them fans are angry, them fans will tear you apart if you don't play well, especially in the postseason. But go back to the point, I saw Chicago not making the playoffs. Just as a Cardinals fan, that's like, for the Cubs fans listening out there, hopefully you understand, the Cubs are like the Yankees to my Red Sox, just so we're clear there. But Marlins, they deserved to be in the playoffs. Talk about a team who rallied, and talk about a team who just loves playing ball. It's the Miami Marlins. I mean, they love playing for their manager. Their manager, obviously, what a story he is, first-year manager, and he makes the playoffs, and he has a chance to make some noise here early.
Yeah, and there's one thing I want to note is that the first 2 pitching matchups for Miami are Jesus Luzardo and Braxton Garrett. And one thing I want to point out, the Marlins went 4-0 against the Phillies with these two guys pitching these first two games. So I gotta go with the Marlins here. I'm gonna go hot. The Marlins get it done in 3. I think that Bryce Harper and Trey Turner, I think those two alone, they're just two slugfest at the plate right now. No matter what ball they get it on, it's gonna be a home run. But there's also a question around the NL batting champ Luis Arias. He's dealing with an ankle injury. The question is he going to play, and is he the X factor? If he's out, does that mean the Marlins are done?
I think it does. If he is out, I think the Marlins rely on him too much, which, sometimes it's okay to rely on a player that much. I mean, look at the Cardinals relying on Nolan Arenado. You think about these other teams. But I think that is the X factor for Miami. That team really, he's a glue guy. He really brings it all together. If he plays well, it seems the team plays well. If he doesn't play well, the team seems to fold, Griff.
Yeah, well, and Dane, you brought up the point with Miami's starting pitching, and while I agree with you, I think that the other side of that, the bullpen, I think Philadelphia's got the bats to beat up on this Miami bullpen. It's not a weakness, but I wouldn't say it's a strength. Mm-hmm. And I think you look at these two games, and I think Luzardo and Garrett pitch really, really well. And I think Miami leads in both of the games, and I think they blow leads in both games and get swept.
Yeah, well, the thing is with this Miami Marlins team, it's like the Cleveland Guardians last year. They're known for being in tight games. Mm-hmm. And they are a really gritty team. They will fight till the very end. They could be down 6-2 against the Phillies, and they could make it a one-run game. This is that kind of team that we're dealing with. And with that kind of team, that all they need to do is just hit. They don't need to get any home runs. They're the opposite of what the teams we were talking about.
Right.
All they need to do is just get base hits. That's all they need to do. They don't need to hit home runs. All they need to do is just hit the ball, put it in play, and get runners in scoring position. And if they do that, they'll be just fine. How is Philadelphia going to keep up with just hitting home runs? Because Philadelphia is a team that will hit dingers for sure, but Miami's a team that's just known to just keep grinding, and just no matter what the score is, they will make it a fair game. And I think that's what's going to push the Marlins over the top.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right there, but I do think that Philly has better starting pitching. To an extent, I like Nola. I think he honestly is one of the best in the game. One of their aces, obviously. And bullpen, Griffin, I've watched Miami's bullpen blow some games. You are exactly right. I think they are going to blow some leads in this series. And I think Philly at home, it's not a good story here for Miami. The Cinderella story, if you will, comes to an end in Philly.
So I'm the only one that has the Marlins here. You guys both have Philadelphia.
Yeah, first time we disagree.
Yeah,
first time.
I mean, sometimes the co-hosts are just going to be smarter than the host. That's okay. But
hey, watch your mouth over there.
Well, I guess we'll see how far I pick the Blue Jays, and maybe you'll be able to say the same thing.
Yeah, I was about to say. Yeah, that's for sure.
World Series champs right there.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll have to wait until the end of the show, folks.
Yep. And that'll move us to our other National League wildcard matchup, the Diamondbacks digging into the 6th seed to take on the Milwaukee Brewers in Brewertown, and that game one will be starting at 7:00 Eastern time. And there was just some news earlier that Brandon Woodruff would probably be out for the Brewers, and that's been one of their strengths is their starting pitching. And I just love this Brewers team. They have been so much better. This is probably the best Brewers team I've seen since the Yelich MVP days, and I just love this matchup, especially with Corbin Carroll coming out and breaking out for the Diamondbacks. It's going to be fun, but I just think that the Brewers are just so good, and I think that this is my Cinderella team to go on a run this year is the Milwaukee Brewers. Give me the NL Central champs, Milwaukee Brewers, in a 2-game sweep.
Yeah, I got to agree with you, and then we'll go on to Landen with his NL Central hate.
You're looking a little eye wide over there.
But I like Milwaukee. The home crowd, it matters, especially like you got a stadium like that. It's indoor. Like Arizona's going to be feeling the heat. I don't think they have there's talent on that roster, but I just don't think there's enough talent overall to break down the Milwaukee defense, to break down their front half of their order. And I think the Brewers get it done. It might take 3, but I just don't see Arizona pulling off the upset.
All right, let's go over to Wide Eyes over here. See what he has to say. 'Cause I know you got some disagreement.
I do. I don't think the Brewers honestly played very well this season. They won a janky division, to be honest with you. I'll say it here. The NL Central was nothing special at all. You're going against a team who is hanging on for dear life at the end of the season. I mean, you look at the Diamondbacks season, they were number one in the league at one point, and then they just took a downward spiral. I think they're angry. I think they're mad. I think Gallen is one of the best in the league. I think he comes and makes a statement. Have they released the pitchers yet?
I don't think not for either.
Okay.
For game one, it's Brandon Pafadat. I think I'm saying that right. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
okay.
yeah, they're starting him game one versus Corbin Burns. I don't think that's a good matchup at all.
Right. I like Brewers in game one there. I think.
Undecided for games 2 and 3 though.
No. D-backs. I think D-backs win 2 and 3. They gotta start Gallen game 2 if they're down.
Maybe. Still undecided. We
right.
don't know who's starting games
Right.
2 and 3 at the time of this recording.
This is going to be a good series, though.
I think so too.
Oh man,
but the thing is, I think the Brewers team, the Brewers are the hottest team in baseball right now. I really do. I think they're the hottest team in baseball, and I think that with this heat, and eventually heat gets extinguished. But I think that the Brewers have started to heat up, and it just takes a little bit of heat. All you need is a little bit of heat to get into this postseason, and it continues to the postseason. And that's why I just love this Brewers team. They're riding off that a little bit of momentum coming into this postseason, and especially with the Cubs sliding off, you know the Brewers are like, yeah, let's go win this thing now. They were worried about the Cubs eventually for a couple months now, overtaking them in the division.
Yeah.
And it's same with the Reds. I mean, the Reds were in that race too at the beginning of the year. And now they're not worried about those two anymore because they're out. They're saying, okay, let's get rid of this. They have all that pressure off their shoulders, and let's say, okay, let's go win this thing now. And I think they get it done against Arizona.
I love Craig Counsell as well.
He's a familiar face to Arizona baseball fans.
Yeah.
He played for the Arizona Diamondbacks in 2000 to 2006.
This is a really tricky series. I do like Craig Counsell. I think he's one of the best in the league. I just think Arizona, they're pretty ticked off that they just barely made the postseason.
Oh, yeah, I 100% agree. But, Griffin, I could tell you wanted to say something over there.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to reiterate my point. I think you're right. I think Gallen starts game 2. And I think Arizona gets game 2. But at the end of the day, Milwaukee's too much. And, I don't see Arizona winning that series.
And what's interesting enough is that Yelich is not even their best batter. It's been Willie Adames. He leads the team in home runs right now. And he's their best player right now. And he's been kind of on this hot streak, especially with the acquisitions they made. They got Carlos Santana, who's a very solid first baseman.
Right.
Who's been a very solid veteran leader, as he's shown Carlos Santana, as we like to call him.
Watch out for William Contreras, too. He got snubbed in MLB.com's top players, I think. He made a tweet earlier today. Contreras, he was really hitting the ball at the end of the season.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited to see him in the postseason.
And then we go to our division series matchups. They're best of 5. I had the Tampa Bay Rays taking on the this is completely wrong. This is the Tampa Bay Rays taking on the Baltimore.
There you
Orioles.
go.
Yeah, I just switched in my notes here. But
Skipping around ahead.
Yeah, Tampa Bay going to Baltimore, and this is going to be a tough one. I think the Orioles are just too young of a team. I think they're too young. They're talented, but I think they're just too young. They need that experience. I think the Rays have that postseason experience that will get them over the top. Plus, you add the pitching is just amazing for the Rays. I think the Rays are probably just one of the most complete teams in the American League, and I think they get it done in Baltimore against Baltimore in 5.
I get the point you're trying to make, Dane, but baseball's different than other sports. You have a 162-game schedule. You get a ton of experience in those games. I don't think being young in the playoffs means as much in baseball as it does in other sports. I back the Orioles based on the talent they have. It's a group that's really melded together well. This team was awful a couple of years ago.
For sure.
And the transformation they've made, this clubhouse gets along. They have fun. And I think in front of their home fans, they get the job done and they move on to the championship series.
And I want to reiterate that the Baltimore rebuild is what a perfect rebuild should look like. It is a perfect example of what a rebuild should do. They added Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, who have been very, very, very solid. They've added Holiday, and he just got called up to the big leagues, and he's been made a significant impact. You got Cedric Mullins out there in center field, who's a veteran leader. Their pitching hasn't really. Felix Bautista is out probably for this playoffs, but he's been an elite closer. But the question really is that are these young guys going to be able to step up to veterans like Randy Arozarena, who's been shown to have clutch in the playoffs, and I just don't see it. And I think the Rays have that experience to get them over the hump against a good team in Baltimore.
I'm going to agree with Griff here. You play a 162 game season. You come into the postseason. You're not really young anymore. Over the course of 162 games, you're forced to grow up very, very quickly. I don't care if you could be 27 years old, first-year rookie. You come into the playoffs, you have to have that mindset that I'm grown up now. I'm not a rookie anymore. I can't be making these mistakes. You do play a 162-game season for a reason. That's because you need to develop. You need to learn from your mistakes here in that 162-game season. So you're exactly right. This is how a rebuild is supposed to look for Baltimore. Tampa will come into this as severe underdogs. And once again, this is where it all started. I mean, the Rays had a division lead at the beginning of the season, and then all out of nowhere, the Orioles come up. So this is honestly the best matchup I think we will see this season. And that they agree with me out there in Sports Link. But I think Baltimore wins this one. What is it? Best of 5, right?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. I think they win this one in 4.
Yeah,
I don't know. These are two exceptional ball clubs.
Exactly.
200 combined wins. That's crazy to say. The Rays are a wild card team at 99-63. I mean, come on, man. And I think it's one of those it's one of those series where it's just who's the home team. I think it goes to 5, and I think the home team wins every single one of those games. And I'm glad that they like my take out there too.
Yeah.
And Griffin is out of here with that statement. But we'll move on to the next divisional series matchup. The Astros are taking on the Blue Jays in my bracket, and this is going to be a tough one, but Griffin, you're going to love me for this one, but I'm going to go with the Blue Jays in 5. I think it's going to be a gritty series. I think if the Blue Jays can find consistent hitting, it's going to be a fun one. And I think that Toronto gets it done in Houston.
It all depends on game one, in my opinion. With the Jays, I have the Jays and Astros as well in this one. It all depends on setting the tone for the series, and game one is so important. Minute Maid Park is going to be rocking. That is what they call it, isn't Houston Minute Maid Park? Yeah, it's going to be rocking. It always is in the playoffs. Former President George Bush will be in the house, of course, and game one is going to be very, very important. And I think Houston will win game one, but I like the Blue Jays in 5 games. I think they win it 3-2.
And I like you, Landen.
I said the same thing.
Like,
he said the same thing.
Oh, did you? Okay,
yes.
Sorry,
Yes.
I was calming the masses over there. But I guess I'm just in time to add to the
they
fire.
agreed with both of you guys.
The Toronto
they went in
Blue
uproar
Jays.
when they heard your take.
Right.
But yeah, I think the Jays the Jays got the talent to beat Houston. It's not going to be easy, but I think the Houston dynasty is coming to an end. Like they're getting old. It happens.
So is their manager.
And they're gonna have to reload and eventually rebuild. And I think that this is gonna be a year where you look back at it and say that the Houston dynasty is dying, because I think you're right. I think they split in Houston, but I don't think it goes to 5. I think Toronto gets it done in 3 and 4 in Toronto. Playoff baseball is ridiculous at Rogers, and I think Houston doesn't see playoff baseball once that series leaves at game 2.
If there's a game that defines Rogers Center baseball, it's no doubt about it when they, exactly what I'm talking about.
And same thing, and it's funny because they played an AL East team in Baltimore, and Encarnacion just hit a complete dinger to walk it off for the Jays. And so this Blue Jays team is known for playoff baseball.
Yeah,
the fans will be rowdy. They will show up. And it's going to be a fun one between Houston and Toronto, as we predict the ALDS matchup will be. And as we move into the NLDS on the other side of the bracket, I had the Marlins and the Braves in the NLDS. I'm just going to say this. The Braves are the most talented team in recent memory in baseball.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't
Braves
really
taking it,
think
I
it
don't care.
matters who comes out of that wild card series. We both have the Phillies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. The Braves lineup and their pitching, it's just
Ridiculous.
It's nuts, and it's absolutely crazy to me that I'm thinking to myself how they're only 104 and 58. Like this seems like a 110 plus win team. And the season they've put together is just outstanding. That NL East division is not easy. 3 playoff teams out of it. Mm-hmm. And, but at the end of the day, it's just there's no chance. It's got to be the Braves in 3 or 4. Sorry.
I said the Braves in 3 against the Marlins. Yeah. They're the best team in baseball. Mm-hmm. It's just I'm not even going to get going any analysis. The Braves are the best team that I've seen in baseball in recent memory, and that's it.
I will go into depth on this. The Braves and the Phillies is my prediction here. This game, I think I said Philly and Miami went to 2, so it's going to be over a week since the Braves have played a baseball game. That's tough in baseball. When you play every single day with 1 day break now and then, it's tough to have a week off of baseball. You get into this routine, and now you're just expected to stop. And then you're expected to pick it back up and play for your season. We saw it last year with the Phils. They came off of a wild card. They had to play a tough team. I remember that. I don't remember who they played, but they played a tough team in the NLDS after they beat St. Louis on the road. This could be just like that NLDS series from last year, where they come in as the underdog with nothing to lose. I honestly think it was Atlanta that they beat.
I'm fact-checking you on that.
Okay. It might have been Atlanta. So they're going to come in as the underdogs.
It was against Atlanta.
Okay, exactly. I think this game goes into 5, but the Braves are way more talented than the Phillies, and the depth is going to show in Game 5, and I think the Braves blow Philly out in Game 5.
Yeah, you make a good point. Like that. There's a reason why everyone talks about starting fresh after the All-Star break. This is that times 2. You get a week off, and the only difference between that and the All-Star break is you lose your top talent during the All-Star break. Here, the Braves are going to be practicing. It's not like they're sitting around playing Call of Duty Warzone or whatever the kids are playing nowadays. but you know what I mean? Like, the Braves are going to be working. They're not going to wait for a team to come into Truist and see what happens. Mm-hmm. They're going to wait for their prey to march in, and they're going to devour. And your point is what makes me reconsider and say 4 rather than a sweep. But I just think the Braves are too good, and they're going to get it done without too much of an issue.
Too talented.
Yeah, and then we move on to the other side of that bracket. I have the Brewers and the Dodgers. I'm going to go with an upset. I'm going to say the Dodgers. I'm going to say the Brewers get it done in 5. They get it. They get that momentum. Like I said, momentum is everything in the postseason. The Brewers move along. They go into Los Angeles. I think that home crowd from Milwaukee is going to be rowdy all postseason long. I think they use that momentum in Milwaukee. And I know they got to go play 3 games in Los Angeles, but I think this series goes 2-2, and then they go to Los Angeles. And I just think that the momentum dies for the Dodgers. I think Milwaukee just has that momentum just to get them over the top. And the Brewers will advance to the NLCS and take on the Braves.
I think you're making the Dodgers out to be something that they're not. I mean, we know what LA's capable of.
I know what LA's capable. I just think that the Brewers are – I just love the Brewers.
Yeah, I just think the Dodgers have too much. I think Milwaukee will give them a run for their money, but LA's LA. It is what it is. I find it very hard to find them just not get out of the divisional series. We'll see what happens, but LA, the bats are good, the pitching's better. Give me LA in 4, maybe 5.
I got LA and the D-backs in the NLDS.
Oh, I forgot you were the odd man out there.
Yes, exactly. Can't pick an NL Central team. LA in the postseason is something. They either get it right on the money like they did in 2020, and what was the year they lost to Boston in the World Series? That was a great.
Was that 19?
That was a
2018.
great LA team, and they could not win a World Series. They always seem to have these moments in the postseason where they just look like a completely different team. We've seen it time and time again with LA, and I think it's going to be one of those times, and I'm going with the upset. I think the Diamondbacks upset the Dodgers in 5 games.
So then we have our championship series. We'll start with the AL. I have Tampa and Toronto in the AL in my ALCS. Oh, that's gonna be a fun one. But I'm gonna pick Tampa. I'm riding the Tampa hype, and I believe that Randy Arozarena and the Tampa Bay Rays, I think they get it done. I think Toronto does win one game. I think Toronto gets at least one, and I think they push it to 5, maybe 6. But I believe that Tampa will be the American League champions, and they will win the pennant and go to the World Series.
Yeah, tough for us to do a whole lot of analysis since we're starting to all have different teams in this.
Yeah.
I got the Orioles and the Jays, and I do think that that's where the Jays' party ends for this season. I think that there's room for them to grow and potentially come back stronger next year, but I don't think they're a World Series team quite yet. Could they? Sure. Will they? Probably not. I think Baltimore has too much, and Toronto will get a couple. I think they win 2 of their 3 at home, and they lose in 6 once that series goes back to Baltimore.
I have Baltimore and Toronto in this one. Man, this is going to be an amazing series. These teams hate each other. Every team in that division hates each other. And you throw it in, you're playing to get to the World Series. You can't write it any better. I think baseball as a whole is really hoping for this matchup right here. I like the Orioles to win this one, though. Toronto, I think they're going to be out of gas in this one. And I think, honestly, this is going to be a bold take. I think Baltimore sweeps them. I think just the gas runs out for Toronto.
Well, and it's a decent point because we've talked about the offensive inconsistency, and it's on and off.
Yeah.
Can they find a 2-week streak where the bats are going crazy? Of course they could, but it's not going to last a month. And if it does, I'll be beyond happy. But I just can't see this Toronto team being hot for the whole postseason. And eventually, you're going to face better and better pitching. And I don't know. I think the offense runs out, as you said, and Baltimore gets done.
Yeah, and then that actually is a really interesting point. I just love Tampa in this matchup.
Right.
I love Tampa in the postseason. They always bring something to the table.
Yeah, they do.
And I know Griffin gave us a thumbs down there as he's a Blue Jays fan here, but I think that Tampa gets it done. Then we move over to the NL pennant matchup. I have the Brewers and the Braves. I think this is where the Brewers eventually run out of luck. I think they at least push it to 6, but I think the Braves get it done in that time frame. They get it done in 6, and they advance to the World Series to take on, I believe I had the Rays, and that's going to be another fun one. I think that this World Series matchup I have between the Rays and the Braves is going to be a fun matchup, and it's going to be a really fun matchup. But I think the Brewers, their pitching is what's going to keep them in the game. I think it's going to keep them in the series. I think they limit the Braves in the beginning of the series, and then they split in Atlanta, and then they also again split in Milwaukee. But then I think Atlanta gets them. They get we can shell these guys, and they just take the next 2, and it's not going to be close. I have the Braves. Give me the mighty Braves in the World Series.
I got the Braves and Diamondbacks in the NLCS. This is honestly, I called this a long time ago on Twitter, before my Twitter got hacked. I had the Braves and Diamondbacks because at the time they were the 2 best teams in the league. I like the Braves 4-2. I think they win games 1 and 2 in Atlanta. They send it back to Arizona. Diamondbacks, they win 2, and then the Braves say, all right, we're done messing around, and they just take games 5 and 6, and then they are headed to the World Series.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. I got the Braves and the Dodgers, who I firmly believe are the best 2 teams in the National League.
Oh, yeah.
And at the end of the day, though, the Dodgers, they've benefited from an NL West, which is underperformed. I mean, I thought the Giants were going to be better. Certainly thought the Padres were going to be better, at least on paper.
That was a disaster this season.
And, yeah, the fact that San Diego isn't even on this bracket is just shocking and devastating to their fan base.
It's a disaster.
At the end of the day, the Dodgers are going to run out of steam. It's not that they're bad. It's just the Braves are better. The Braves are out of this world compared to any team in the National League. And I think that they get it done at home to go up 2-0. Dodgers get 1 of their 3, but I don't think that series even goes back to Atlanta. I think they get it done at Dodger Stadium.
And I think to say that anything short of a World Series for Atlanta, it's a completely pitiful season. If they don't make the World Series, if they do not make the World Series this season, it is a failure of a season for them. That's how good this Atlanta team is. Now, I think Atlanta does go there. So my World Series, I have Atlanta and Tampa. And, again, it's World Series or bust for Atlanta. They win it this year. I think this is too good of an Atlanta team.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be very, very struggling and a dog fight for this Tampa Bay team. But I think Atlanta gets it done and wins the 2023 World Series.
Yeah, I'll get to my pick in a minute, but I got to go back to what you just said because you're out of your brain. You just said that the Braves season will be a failure.
With how
if they don't make a World Series, you'll look back on this team and it'll be disappointing. But if you're gonna look back on this team and be like, wow, it's still a heck of a team. You got 104 wins and hands down the best team in the league. I just can't see any situation where I look back on this Braves team and think that they were a failure. Would it be disappointing? Yeah, but I think if they don't win it this year, they'll win it next year. Yeah. I don't think there's another team in Major League Baseball that's going to improve enough from this year to next year to challenge the Braves. I think that it's possible they might not get it done in this window, but there is a ring in the future for Atlanta. As far as my pick, I'm just going to completely contradict everything I just said, and I'm going to say that the Baltimore Orioles are going to get it done. Not because the Braves are bad, but because sometimes there's a disappointing end to a great season. And we've seen it before in every sport. You know, the Warriors back in 2015, 2016. The great team. You look back on it as one of the best teams in NBA history, but a disappointing end of the season. Doesn't take away from anything else they've done. But I think the Orioles, I'm ride or die for the Birds, and I mean the Blue Jays when I say that, but I'm picking the Orioles to win a World Series.
Man, that's a bold take, especially if a Blue Jays fan taking a AL East rival.
I told you I'd try to keep the bias down.
I know.
Now, I'm going to throw my computer out the window as soon as we're done recording. We'll see how Tuesday and Wednesday go.
Right. Now, I have the Orioles and Braves at like Griffin, and this Braves team, I mean, they're one of the best I think we've ever seen. At least in my lifetime. I'm 19. The Orioles, what a story they have. You know, I think they ride high into the series, and ultimately, I think Morgan Wallen writes a new song about the 23 Braves. If love was a game and we were a team, would have been the 23 Braves because the Orioles are gonna win it in 7.
And that's how this show will end. You know our picks for this MLB postseason, and Landen, Griffin, Blue Jays royalty fan. I appreciate you guys having you guys on this show. It's been a pleasure to have this hour with you guys, and it's going to be a really fun postseason for you guys. Any final thoughts about this postseason?
I just got one thing to say. I hope that Angel Hernandez and Malachi Moore are nowhere near. Do you guys know Malachi Moore?
Yes.
That man can go back to AAA. It is one of the if I see him on a playoff crew, I will be disappointed and will be watching a different game. But I hope that the tournament goes well. I hope that there's not a whole lot of controversy. There's a lot of really good teams and a lot of really good storylines, and I'm excited to see what happens. But yes, Malachi Moore, Angel Hernandez. See ya in spring training.
Keep CB Buckner out as well. And anybody know what time the Cardinals play?
That'd be in March.
Yeah.
That's gonna wrap up this episode of My 2 Cents. Thank you to my two guests, Griffin and Landen, for being on the show. We will be live on Wednesday, where we will have Isaiah Rosner and Evan Stowell back on the show. This has been an episode of My 2 Cents presented by SL Digital Radio and presented by Victory Honda Muncie. This is Dane Massey saying so long from SL Digital Studios.
This has been a production of SportsLink Digital Radio.